Hello, everyone. Drew Campbell from the GPNI, or AKA the Human Potential Project podcast. And here, for our very first time live in person, we have the real and the real, Dr. Reid Real. He doesn't like me to call him doctor. Nonetheless, he is a PhD doctor. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Drew. Absolute pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me for your first guest on the podcast, Tea with Drew.
Tea with Drew. I'm a bit of a Chinese tea drinker. This one is a red tea or black tea. We like to say in Australia.
Hongcha, right?
Hongcha. Hongcha. Yes, your Chinese is pretty good, mate.
I'm trying.
Very good. I just poured it earlier, so we call it in China Kung Fu Cha. So Kung Fu tea.
Kung Fu tea. There you go. I've learned something.
Kung Fu tea. I like my Chinese tea. I don't drink too much coffee these days. So this has a little bit of caffeine, so it'll keep us perky. So welcome, mate. I just wanted to get you in, and you're working at the UFC PI in Shanghai.
Correct.
Okay, good. And tell us a bit about you for the audience that don't know the really real Reid Real. Tell us about you. What's your background, mate? How did you get into performance nutrition?
Sure.
Cheers, by the way.
Cheers. I might wet the whistle. Delicious. 好喝.
好喝.
好喝. All right. So a little bit about my background. So I know this is a long-form conversation podcast, so I'll kind of elaborate and paint the whole picture.
Go down those rabbit holes, man.
Sure.
That's what they were here for.
So, like you said, I work for the UFC Performance Institute in Shanghai, but it all started, over 15 years ago. So I won't delve right into my childhood, but I'm Australian, if you can't tell from my accent, for the listeners out there.
So am I, for other people that can't tell.
There we go. So two Aussies.
Both from Melbourne.
Here, both from Melbourne.
From the western suburbs.
Correct. So yes. So I am Australian and grew up outside of Melbourne. In terms of like education and sporting background, so I'm a lifelong martial artist. Participated in different martial arts ever since I was a young child. Got really serious when I was about 20 when I started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's kind of my passion now and what I've been training for the past 15 years or so. So also just on that, so I'm a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Oh, okay. At what level?
First Dan.
First Dan, okay.
Yeah. So yes, so love my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and combat sports and martial arts.
And what age again? What time?
I started training Jiu-Jitsu when I was 20, but prior to that, it was Kyokushin karate, a little bit of judo, a little bit of Muay Thai, various other martial arts. I did every ninjutsu and kung fu and karate and all that sort of stuff when I was younger. Wow. I learned how to use nunchucks and all this.
Really?
So, yeah. So
did you knock yourself out nearly a few times, or hit yourself in the balls?
Definitely, yes.
Because I did the same with the nunchuckers.
Half of the course with the nunchucks. But
or destroyed mum's pot plant.
Correct. Yes. And so kind of lifelong martial artist. Started off like my health and fitness career as a personal trainer. So I did in Australia at the time, they were called the Certificate 3 and 4 in fitness, to work as a personal trainer in a gym. So I worked as a gym instructor and also a personal trainer before starting university a little late. So when I was 21, I didn't go to university until I was 21. And it was after doing the Cert 3 and 4 in fitness that I learned a bit about the human body and
so you went back as a mature age student?
Correct, yeah, I did.
Okay, interesting. Actually, I did the same thing.
Yeah, so I actually left school when I was 16, so I dropped out of high school and never finished high school.
Interesting. I didn't know that about you.
Yeah. I mean, we could go down some real rabbit holes, but did a bunch of different jobs and ended up doing the personal training because I got into working out myself after a bit of an accident.
What was the craziest or job that you did that has nothing related? What did you do in that period?
I've done so many things. So one of the most fondest and awful memories was working in an abattoir. So I worked in abattoirs for almost 2 years.
Wow.
When I was 17, 18.
Out in Werribee?
Correct, yeah.
In Werribee?
It was Laverton.
So Laverton, I know. Laverton Airport.
Yeah, I worked in abattoirs for almost 2 years. Pork abattoirs. I didn't kill any pigs, but I cut up a lot. So it was separated into two different areas, the kill floor and the boning room. I worked in the boning room.
So you weren't a vegan at that stage?
I was definitely not a vegan at that stage, yeah.
Or later stage.
I ate a lot of pork. And then I did all the trades: roof tiling, bricklaying, carpentry,
Wow.
roof plumbing. Yeah, all that. Roof tiling is the most brutal, I think. But yeah,
and dangerous too.
And dangerous, yeah.
So you did all of that,
Yeah.
and then you did personal training.
And I got into working out.
Okay.
So I had had a bit of an accident and had to do some rehab, and then got into like lifting weights as part of rehab, and then got interested in strength training and kind of started going to the gym a lot and ended up being quite fascinated. You know, you read the bodybuilding magazines and learn about training and about nutrition and all that sort of stuff. And
Muscle and Fitness.
Were
you a subscriber like me?
I was not.
I used to get them every single week or month, I should say, as a subscription.
Okay.
And then I had the posters. I was just explaining this to Cliff Wilson, my previous podcaster. I had the posters in my room as a teenager. Then I'd have girlfriends coming over, and I had, half-naked men with little Speedos on all through my wall. They actually thought I was a little bit strange with my Muscle and Fitness subscription.
I definitely wasn't that committed to the
I was in the bodybuilding path back in the early 90s, so a little bit different era, and not down the martial arts path that you went.
Yeah, it was funny. I got into strength training, and obviously you follow the bodybuilding routines, but I don't ever think I wanted to be a bodybuilder. It was never that. It's just like you want to get stronger and leaner and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so I worked as a personal trainer in gym for a year or a little bit more, and actually continued throughout university. But it was probably a year and a half in that I decided I wanted to learn more. So I went to university. Went to Deakin University.
Okay.
Originally in Geelong and then Melbourne.
Was that hard? You didn't finish high school.
Yeah.
How did you transition into doing that?
Yeah. So in Australia they have like you alluded to a pathway into university called mature age students, and so you either have to go back and like resit your high school exams, or you can do at the time they called it like a stat test. It's not an IQ test, but it's like some sort of kind of general knowledge and I guess ability to learn type kind of test for people that want to take this pathway, and I got quite good marks in that, and then was able to get into university that way.
Okay.
And I was always, without kind of tooting my own horn, I was always like, I guess reasonably intelligent, but just kind of did the wrong things at school and hang out with the wrong crowd and ended up
sounds like me.
Sounds like a lot of people.
I almost dropped out, but that's for another podcast.
I mean, we're very fortunate in Australia to get those second chances, because in a lot of countries that wouldn't have been possible. So
absolutely, I went back as a mature age student. I barely passed high school. In fact, I was highly recommended to not even finish high school by one teacher. I'm not sure if that was a good teacher or not, but didn't do too well. Then did a 2-year TAFE certificate course on film and television. Now I'm producing podcasts. So I learned something, not really. That was back in the analog days of film and TV. And then
back in this one,
it was pretty much, mate. I actually used Super 8 film and created a few films. But then I was in the hospitality industry, bars and nightclubs, or working till 4 or 5 a.m. Hated it, but it was working out all the time. But then I actually went back as a mature age student, and like you, and studied public relations and marketing. But then cracked up created a very large credit card bill on my American Express credit card on supplements, because I was literally addicted to bodybuilding and supplements and sports nutrition. This is now 20 years ago. So then needed to find a job, and anyway, enough about me. But I also went as a mature age student, like you, mate. Yeah,
gotcha.
Because I was shit at high school as well.
I mean, there's many routes to where you end up in life, and again, we're quite fortunate that we grew up and studied in a country that enabled those second chances and you to kind of find your way. But yeah, so started university, studied at that time was called health science, and so health science at Deakin University encompassed a broad range of
Deakin's
topics.
A good university, from my understanding, from my memory.
I mean, it did all right for me.
Yeah,
I don't think it's a Melbourne Uni or a Sydney Uni or
RMIT
or one of these ones, but but it's different, right? I'm not studying law; it's exercise science and nutrition.
Correct.
So and so health science, you could pick your majors, things like psychology, nursing, nutrition, food chemistry, etc., etc. And my majors were exercise science, nutrition, and biochemistry. Because for some reason I had it in my mind that I wanted to be a dietitian. I thought strength and conditioning or nutrition, and for some reason I was a little bit more interested in nutrition. And then I kind of said to myself, like, what's the pinnacle of nutrition? And at that stage, it was at least in the university sector and in Australia, it was to become a dietitian. And I also thought that, okay, I want to do sports because I'm interested in sports and athletic performance. But if this doesn't work out, I still need to get a job.
Sure.
And so being a dietitian would enable me to be able to work in the hospital system in clinical settings. So so I had that in my mind. So I did a 3-year degree in health science, and then a 1-year honours year, they call it, after the degree, which was a 1-year research project. And that was looking at inflammation in human skeletal muscle in response to high fat and low fat feeding. In healthy people and those with metabolic syndrome. So it was like healthy people and obese people, and then we fed them high fat and low fat, and then they measured inflammation in various tissues in the body. My particular project was looking at skeletal muscle and just looking at these effects. So it was a lot of pipetting chemicals and doing PCR analysis, which nobody knew about until 18 months ago. And now everybody knows the word PCR because of COVID tests.
COVID tests, yes.
But I did a lot of PCR
and what was
analysis.
the, I mean, on the PCR test, and what was the what was the conclusion? I mean, inflammation on low fat and high fat diets. Was there any conclusion?
There was, and it's so funny because it's like it's exactly what we already knew and more of what we've been telling the general population for decades and decades. But everybody likes to think that it's changing and it flip-flops, and that what they said 20 years ago is the complete opposite to now. But basically it was this: high fat feeding resulted in more inflammation than low fat feeding. High saturated fat resulted in more inflammation than low saturated fat. So if it was unsaturated versus saturated, and those with metabolic syndrome or those who are obese had exaggerated inflammatory responses compared to those who were not. So it's
did you measure on healthy fats, like just a healthy fat diet?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so the healthy fat, so the unsaturated fat versus saturated, which is generally how they kind of split those hairs. The unsaturated fat had much lower inflammatory responses compared to
would you say on
saturated fat.
With much lower to equal to no fat or the low fat diets?
So my particular part of the project was just looking at high fat feeding. And so that's the results that I can speak to. But my was only a 1-year project, was part of a much larger project that looked at all these different like high fat versus low fat, etc., etc. So I still believe that, and the inflammatory markers that we were looking at were responding to fat. So maybe like my recollection is that even the high unsaturated fats relative to no fat was still high inflammatory response. But that's not to say that there's other markers in the body that were more favorable with the high healthy fats compared to low healthy fats. But the things that we were looking at were these specific inflammatory markers, cytokines and tumor necrosis factor alpha and IL-6 and IL-1 beta and some other ones. Which it gets down a lot of rabbit holes there.
Yeah, it'd be interesting because if you're looking at a lot of
and they also looked at acute feeding versus like months of this stuff. Whereas mine looked at the acute feeding. It was feed the person the diet, take a muscle biopsy
straight away,
like maybe like 3 or 6 hours later or something, and look at it there. Obviously, there's different implications for the chronic inflammatory status over a longer period of time.
Big difference, because it changes the gut microbiome as well. And when you're changing that,
then you're lots of stuff that goes on.
And because I'm hugely into the inflammation topic. I suffered from rheumatoid arthritis 6 years ago, and I'd say largely I'm symptom free unless I don't look after myself and the symptoms come back. Because largely, if you do have an autoimmune disease, generally it's not curable, especially if you get down the medical pathway. But something I read in the many books I read was that you're never really cured, but you can be symptom free if you look after yourself. And it's largely to do with inflammation, gut health, etc., etc. But also choosing the right fats is very important on keeping those inflammation markers at bay.
Sure.
Good fats, your omega-3, decrease inflammation, from my understanding.
Yes,
but again,
yes.
you've done the research, and this is what we have on the Human Potential Project podcast is understanding what it means to be either disease free or being the best you can be at optimizing human health, and understand it from the science point of view as well.
For sure.
So it's very interesting. The research you did is around that.
Yeah, and I'm by no means an expert at that specific area of physiology and nutritional biochemistry. Obviously, I've got a greater understanding than the average person, and hopefully a very good understanding.
Sure.
But I mean, you could get experts on this podcast that could really drill down on that stuff.
Yeah, well, maybe we should do that.
Sure.
That's a subject in the future. I'm sure you know a few, mate.
I can definitely reach out to some people. Yeah, yeah.
Awesome, mate.
So moving on. So that
let me make some more tea. Keep talking, and I'll do another pot.
So yeah, like I said, I had my eyes set on being a dietitian.
Yep.
In order to be a dietitian, I needed to do that undergraduate degree and biochemistry and whatnot. But I actually didn't get straight into the Masters of Dietetics. So you needed to do an undergrad plus a master's degree. And then for some reason at that stage, being a dietitian was quite popular, and it was really in fashion. So a lot of people applied for this master's, and I unfortunately didn't get in straight away. But they told me, my supervisors at university told me, hey, do this honors degree. It's 1 year research degree. And then after you do that, it'll make you look really good. And then you can get into the master's the following year. So that's what I did. And then I got into the master's degree because to be honest, I mean, it was very good that I did the honors. But at that stage, I wasn't really interested in research. I just wanted to be a dietitian and work with people.
So you had, at that stage of your career, you had no aspirations of going into the UFC, and that was kind of like a pipe dream.
It was. It wasn't even a pipe dream.
Well, also the UFC wasn't the UFC
exactly
as it is today.
Yes.
$4.5 billion enterprise. Now, back then, it was bankrupt, losing money for
exactly.
20 years.
Maybe they just bought at that stage. I started university in 2006, so that's that.
It was cage fighting back then.
Yeah,
with very little credibility.
Tank Abbott and whatnot,
and a lot of performance enhanced athletes. I heard that term recently with Cliff Wilson, who we had on. He liked to phrase it as performance enhanced athletes, rather than just calling them juiced up to the gills.
I mean, but
I like that political slant. Performance enhanced.
But back then, you would like a good argument could be made that you were dumb to not
second
have
pot,
done
by
that.
the way. It's a little stronger. Yeah.
Yes.
The second pot. The third pot will be even stronger again on this one.
Delicious.
好喝.
很好喝. So yeah, did the honors year, and then did the 18-month masters. That was just 1 year in addition to the undergrad. Started my masters. I was 18 months. Thank you very much, kind sir.
You're welcome.
Did the master's degree, and the Masters of Dietetics was good. It was probably 6 months of coursework and then 1 year of like practical internship. So I worked in a hospital for several months, worked in the community care setting, and then also like a food service setting.
Okay.
And so you learn like how to implement all the knowledge that you've learned in depth with mentors and really put your nutrition knowledge to clinical use, and so we learned a lot, and that was a really good program that I did at Deakin. So that kind of, at that stage, I'd done what's that, like 5.5 years of uni, and done the undergrad, the honors, and the masters, and then I started.
Wow, that's a lot of commitment and study there, mate.
Yeah,
you didn't get an easy path.
No,
and especially starting from where you were at. I mean, you weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth or an academic spoon in your mouth. You went the hard path.
For sure. I actually didn't know anybody that had gone to university when I was younger. So maybe that's what influenced me to leave school and never thought about it. But yeah, and all throughout this time, I kept working in gyms as a personal trainer, and a gym instructor, and also continue to train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and fell more and more in love with.
And this is in Werribee, Whereabouts in this? Because I'm a Western suburbs boy as well.
Yes.
Although not born and bred, I moved to the Western suburbs in 1998 in Footscray.
Gotcha.
Grand Sale.
I ended up in Footscray. This will come in later in the story. But at that stage, so I started my university in Geelong, and then because that was the undergrad, and then the masters was in Burwood, so Box Hill, so the other side of the city.
Yeah,
but I didn't live over there. I lived Western suburbs, so I lived around Werribee and Altona and St Albans and Footscray and that area.
Altona Tip.
That was where you used to go treasure hunting with your dad when you were younger.
You remember that story? Yeah. Yes.
No, that's what I did. I thought that's what everybody did.
Yes, you go treasure hunting and you'd stink like rubbish, but hey, you always found something.
And your dad said, "Go in there and get that bike."
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So after I finished the masters, then I entered the workforce. Took me 6 months to find a job. My first job as a dietitian was actually working for a corporate health company.
So you were a dietitian, because it's interesting because a lot of, not all, sports nutrition experts are actually dietitians. Yeah.
So in Australia they have an accreditation scheme called the Sports Dietitians Association of Australia.
Yes,
the condition of being a sports dietitian is you have to be a dietitian to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's quite different. In the US, it's the same. In the UK, they actually have different routes of clinical dietetics and then like sports nutrition.
Okay.
And so they're quite different. But everybody has different career paths.
Yes.
But it certainly doesn't hurt to have extra knowledge and to have a clinical background. And so in Australia, you have to do that. But I didn't work in hospitals other than during my internship. And it's fascinating.
I can't imagine you working in hospitals. Reid has the best bedside manner, I must admit, but I just can't imagine you working in hospitals. That's a joke, by the way.
It's interesting. I like the physiology and the background of the clinical nutrition. But the hospital rounds and speaking to sick people and stuff, it's
and I'm sure there's some political
there's just it's not, and I'm not discouraging it to anybody, and I'm not shitting on people in that system, but it's a little bit disheartening, and particularly in the acute care setting.
Yes,
you might get somebody who's just had a heart attack.
Yes,
and they're in Footscray Acute Hospital for 2 days or 3 days, and they send in the dietitian to go speak to them. And somebody's just had a heart attack. They're not really receptive to the education at that stage. In the longer care community setting or the outpatient setting where you get to see people on an ongoing basis, that's a little bit more rewarding because you're getting to work with people over a longer period of time.
Sure. But correct if I'm wrong as well, when you're a dietitian and you're working in the hospital space, there are a lot of parameters, legalities, liabilities, and protocol within the diets you're allowed to give. Course. And although that covers you legally, it may not be what the cutting edge science is saying.
I would disagree to a certain point, because it's the same with medicine. The same argument could be made with medicine, is that the doctor's just following the medical standard of care.
Okay.
So there's, and I forget the exact terminology, but there's the same with dietetics. So there's the dietetics best practice standard of care. So this is how you handle somebody with diabetes. This is how you handle somebody with cancer. Now, of course, there's a little bit of wiggle room to use your professional judgment, but the same in sports nutrition. These best practice guidelines are based off a tremendous amount of clinical research. And informed expert opinion. So, you could say that it's not cutting edge, and you're not. You can't say you're not doing everything you can for the patient. You could say that there's this new study that come out. Why aren't you doing this? But they review these standards of care on an ongoing basis. So you're taught at university. The up-to-date.
So there isn't. So you're saying there isn't as much, because again, I'm not from this industry. I think it's interesting for people out there that may have a different opinion. There isn't large constraints or handcuffs on the dietitian within that practice. They have some flexibility
for sure. I wouldn't say handcuffs. I would say that it's the same with medical professionals. It's a good thing because there's best practice. strategies and guidelines that you apply,
Mhm.
and then there's a bit of wiggle room that you make your own personal judgment on, patient by patient.
Okay.
But by and large, these best practice guidelines are what's best for the patient. But it's you're using your clinical judgment to see what kind of patient this is, where exactly they fit within the range of possible treatment options.
Can the new, functional medicine type of standard, can that be played within a dietitian's role?
For sure, yeah, and it's ongoing. You'll speak with the doctors about
by taking that holistic. What I mean when I say functional medicine, going down that rabbit hole of what is the true cause, not the symptoms, but what is the true cause of the ailment that patient is suffering from.
Well, I mean, you're always considering these things, and that's why it's like important to know as much as you can about the patient's history, to read all the doctor's notes, converse with the doctors about what they're doing in terms of the medical and pharmaceutical strategies and interventions they're using, and marry that up with the nutritional interventions. And of course, very difficult patients will go to the very experienced dietitians, and they'll always have like somebody very experienced at the head of the nutrition department, and the lowly ranked new grads running around and doing the bulk of the work, and the difficult patients and those most at risk.
Sure.
So general kind of weight loss and malnutrition and things like this. This is not that. This is less difficult to come up with the best practice strategy. Whereas somebody with failing, who's got renal disease or some sort
IBS,
of hepatic, that's maybe around the middle. But these all like say like parental nutrition, so like feeding through an IV. Okay. And then those with that have come into the ICU, and maybe they've failing renal system or hepatic system, something like this. This requires a higher level dietitian that's very experienced in that area.
Okay.
But they do a good job, and particularly in Australia. Like I know when I was in the US, which we'll get into that
a little bit, mate. You got the framing.
We'll get into the US a little bit later, but certainly in the US there seemed to be a broader range of qualities of experts.
Yes, exactly.
I would say, whereas in Australia, I think every dietitian that I met in Australia, I would say 99% of dietitians in Australia do a very good job, and for 90% of clinical conditions can handle it. And then obviously there's some very high level, very complicated cases. If you've watched the show House,
I haven't watched it.
You don't remember House? It was back, maybe it was 10, 15 years ago. It was like the medical show. Hugh Laurie, he was the doctor. And every episode, it's like Grey's Anatomy or something like
10 years
this,
ago.
where they had, it must be more than that. But, there's obviously, you always get within medicine, these
anomalies,
obscure anomalies,
one in a million,
and people are scratching their head. You can't expect
that's different.
You can't expect everybody to know how to deal with this.
Well, that's interesting. Let's shift it up a little bit.
Sure.
But this is super interesting.
Went down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's what the podcasts are about, right? The rabbit holes and exploring, true human potential on all levels, including performance nutrition. How's that tea now? That's the third one. It's now at a
little bit stronger. It's nice.
A little bit stronger, yeah.
I think you want me to get to the sports.
Yeah. Oh, just with tea, I was just going to say, I mean, it's I've learned a lot, and every pot is different, and every tea is different.
Okay.
Yeah. This has actually got quite a bit of caffeine, one of the few Chinese tea that has quite a bit of caffeine. So keep us perky.
Sure.
So we'll switch gears into sports nutrition, and I think I mean, you've got the for at least on the outside, and I'm sure on the inside it's a little bit different, but I'm sure there's a lot of people jelly on the podcast listening. My Reid works for the UFC. Man, I mean, it's a dream job for a lot of people, apart from, studies at Deakin, eventually getting your master's degree. And I mean, my hat's off. I didn't know this background about you, the hard yards, but probably gives some context behind some of the other conversations we've had. You've paved your own road, and it's been a difficult one. So again, my hat's off to you. But how did you, I mean, it sounds tough there, but transitioning, and I believe you went to the Gatorade Sports Science Institute in America. Yeah. So, he's an Aussie guy from western suburbs, Melbourne, and everyone's from Australia, western suburbs, or from Australia knows, and that's where I was for 10 years before coming overseas and living 40% of my life in another country. It's a very simple, humble experience. The Western suburbs. So he's this, Aussie Western suburbs boy. Eventually got his master's degree. Didn't finish high school.
Yeah.
How did you transition to go to America with the Gatorade Sports Science? Because
Sure.
that alone, I mean, if you get the UFC, that alone is a big feather in your cap. How
Sure.
did you get there?
Yes. So the last part to the academic story, and then what leads into that was after the masters, I worked as a corporate dietitian for a corporate health company. I won't go into that. That gets more boring, and we're trying to move ahead. I did that for almost 2 years, and then accredited myself as a sports dietitian. And part of that was to go to the Australian Institute of Sport to do a short
And that was
course.
in Australia in the SDA,
yes, correct.
Sports Dietitian Association.
Yeah, Sports Dietitians Australia.
Australia, that's right.
SDA.
Yeah, I met the lady, blonde lady. I can't remember her name. That's why I said blonde lady.
Yes.
Excuse my ignorance. But a few years ago, lovely lady. She did a talk in Beijing.
Gotcha.
Years and years ago, and she was the head of it or something.
Yeah, they've changed in the last few years, but and the name, I'm drawing a blank as well, but we can find out. Afterwards.
Sure. But you got that accreditation.
Yeah, so I went to do that, but
and how long does that take to get?
Again, because you're already a dietitian, that's the bulk of it. You go and do it's a 4-day intensive course with then a bunch of learnings and things afterwards and homework and assignments and whatever. But the key part was that course is hosted at the Australian Institute of Sport.
Okay.
And so when I was there, I met a bunch of people, and it turns out that the Australian Institute of Sport were offering a scholarship for somebody to do a PhD in combat sports. And so they wanted a dietitian with research background to do this PhD. And I was a dietitian with a research background and also mad about combat sports.
Yeah.
And so that led to me meeting the right people. And then I was offered this scholarship and I did a PhD at the Australian Institute of Sport, which is the Olympic Training Centre in Australia.
Wow.
And my PhD focused on weight cutting in combat sports.
Wow.
And so I was a dietitian, I was a jiu-jitsu nerd. And it was a very good fit. So I moved to Canberra.
Very good fit. There's not too many real Reids in the world, right?
Yeah.
Your pedigree.
It was good. So I was a purple belt in jiu-jitsu at the time.
Okay.
Moved to Canberra. Lived in Canberra for 3 or 4 years.
How was that? Did you nearly die of boredom, or you're too busy?
Canberra was very boring, but if you
I've been there.
If you need to do a PhD somewhere, Canberra's the place to do it
because there's no distractions. Yeah, they've got like one shopping center in the middle of town.
Yeah, it's a bit more than that, but yeah.
But a beautiful botanical gardens.
Yeah.
Did you ever go there?
It's actually, I think I did. I think they have a.
It's about 20 minutes from the center because it's very small, Canberra.
I think they have like a flower festival that's at the gardens once a year that people go to hang out.
Beautiful botanical gardens.
Yeah.
I went there we're getting a bit sidetracked here, but I went through there for the first time in my life and the only time with my wife traveling right up the East Coast up to Sydney, driving from Castlemaine, Bendigo, from my mother's house. And we drove there and I went to the War Memorial where my grandpa had his plaque, and my grandpa has his name.
Memorial's impressive there.
Name on a plaque there, which was really nice to see. But anyway, a bit sidetracked there. Wow, so you got your PhD from the Olympic Committee.
Well, so it's joined with the university. So it was the University of Sunshine Coast in Queensland.
Okay.
But I never went to the university. They just pay the scholarship money.
Yeah, Sunshine Coast would be a bit of a distraction as well.
Correct. And stamp the PhD.
Okay.
But so that was a really good experience.
But that was together with the Australian Institute of Sport.
Yeah, it's like they collaborate with universities to get students as slave labour to do the PhD. So instead of normally you do a PhD, you teach classes at a university. But my PhD was I didn't have to teach classes at a university, but I worked as a dietitian with all of our Olympic combat sports teams in the lead up to the Rio Games. So it was fantastic for me. I got experience working as a dietitian with all the Olympic teams, boxing, judo, wrestling, taekwondo.
Interesting.
For 3 or 4 years, and conducted research with elite level athletes.
And real life experience. Which is a lot in and this is what I think makes you very interesting and why it's amazing to have you on the podcast and working with you as one of our experts and content creators and et cetera, because not all PhDs have real life experience.
Correct.
They have they're very intelligent academics, but they can't keep the content that they're expressing in a real life scenario because they lack that real life experience.
Yeah.
So you have not only real life experience, but you've been, how old were you then? Working with these athletes in Canberra?
I was like 27 to, it must have been 27, like 27 to 31.
Okay. Interesting.
26 to 30, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and so prior to that time, I'd work as a personal trainer with athletes as well, and various combat sport athletes, and train myself. And then that was like the pinnacle in Australia, at least, working with the combat sports teams. And so that was in the lead up to the Rio Games, and I got to travel the world with these teams to Japan and Korea and all over Europe. And I actually went to Rio. I didn't go during the Olympic Games. I went right before the Olympic Games. To check out the Olympic Village and travel with one of our athletes for a boxing tournament that was happening before the Olympics. But yeah, very good experience for me. So got to conduct the research, travel with athletes and teams, and also be mentored by like the best in the world. So the Australian Institute of Sport, it's kind of its notoriety, so to speak, has decreased a little bit in recent years, but they really led the world in sports science research and applied sports science research,
they
like
did.
you're talking about, for decades, from the 80s until just
They're
recently.
I mean, to give context and to wave the Australian flag a little bit, we have a tiny population.
Yeah.
I mean, by population, we lead the Olympics. You know, if you're looking at, I mean, yes, China's got 1.3, 1.6 billion people. The US is 300 million people, and a much bigger economy to pump into things. Per capita, we lead the Olympics by a long shot.
Yeah, I'm not sure of those numbers, so I'm not going to agree with you, but we do, and we're very good in any case.
Very good. And growing up, and I agree that the Australian Institute of Sport has lost some notoriety, but when I was growing up as a young kid, it was all about the Australian Institute of Sport and the amount of funding the government put into that and supported it. And we produced some incredible athletes.
And incredible science aside from that. And so even if we weren't getting that, they were getting the results in terms of Olympic medals, but even aside from that, just the research and the science that was generated from that. And the AIS, they had this PhD program for years where, similar to myself, where PhD students would go in there, work with athletes, get their PhD, and then like 90% of these PhDs that went through there get jobs all around the world in different sporting institutes, in Qatar at Aspire Academy, and in America, working with all of the
and this was
the
free work
sports
as well, right? I mean, this was
you would get a little top up, but you get a scholarship from the government to get a PhD. It was about 35,000 Australian dollars, and then the AIS would top it up like 5 or 10 grand a year. So it wasn't bad.
But free accommodation and all of that stuff?
No, not free accommodation.
So it's not a lot, but I guess I mean, where others are paying, $100,000 to do a PhD, that's pretty damn good.
Yeah,
it's good for the country, because you're getting, great, passionate PhD level people teaching your athletes. So it's a win-win. I like that. I didn't know that. I appreciate you sharing it.
That was the whole model. And then there was generations of scientists and PhDs that come out of that and then went all over the world, and they, work. Like the US is full of Australian sports scientists, like all the NBA, NFL, MLB teams.
And Australian filmmakers and actors.
There you go. Yeah.
And business owners in Asia. Australia produces some of we've had this conversation, I think, before, with some of the best in the world in all areas, but we have a bit of a glass ceiling in Australia. Yeah. It's hard to go anywhere at a certain level. And we also have something else in Australia, part of the only country in the world, the tall poppy syndrome. I think we've discussed that before as well. So it's a great thing. We produce some amazing, handsome, successful, awesome guys, Drew and Reid, but we all leave.
Yeah. And so then fast forward. So after I finished my stint at the AIS, got my PhD, applied for jobs around the world, was fortunate enough to receive an interview, which turned into about 5 or 6 interviews, because that's why they do it in the US, to get a job with the Gatorade Sports Science Institute. And
for people who don't know the Gatorade Sport, I know a little bit, because what you've shared and other people have shared who they are. Because most people who don't know, they think, Gatorade's, it's just about Gatorade, this sugary, blah, blah, blah drink. But the Institute itself is, if correct me if I'm wrong, one of the institutes when it's looking at research science.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's sponsored by the Gatorade drink, but it does a lot more than that.
Yeah. I mean, they just look at, there's obviously a key focus, not on the Gatorade drink itself, but on sports nutrition and specifically hydration.
Mm.
So, you know, I don't work for them anymore, so I'm not just saying things to make them look good, but they have done a lot of the leading research in terms of hydration and sweat loss and replacement of sweat loss and all this sort of stuff. So it's not just research to make the drink look good.
Sure.
They think, and they're right, that they lend legitimacy to the drink by having a research arm that just promotes sports nutrition research and sports physiology research in general. We were never told that, hey, we need to make this drink look good at all costs.
That's great.
It was they do research across the board, and they're spreading out more into different nutrition research and different sports science research not related to nutrition at all. So we did stuff on sleep, on recovery, on metabolic rate. So we published one paper looking at predicting metabolic rate in high school athletes and things like this. And so I was based in Florida at the IMG Academy, which is like an elite sporting high school. So it's this high school costs $100,000 a year to send your kid to high school.
Yeah, high school.
High school, yeah, high school. And so the parents, they're billionaires and millionaires that send their kids there. They think they send their kid to this high school. They get very good at whatever sport they play. Plus, they think they're going to get a college scholarship out of it, or at least have a good chance at it. And so this was the this is where like Andre Agassi and I think who's the other one? I'm drawing a blank on the name here, but like a lot of the tennis players. So it was originally the Nick Bollettieri Tennis Academy in Bradenton, Florida. So this guy got famous for producing Andre Agassi and some other people. And then it was like a sporting high school where he would just have these kids play tennis all day and do their school. And then that grew into other sports. So it was tennis and then golf. And then IMG bought it off this guy who made it the IMG Academy. And,
Interesting.
And yeah, so it's an elite sporting high school for kids. It's about 50% internationals, a lot of Chinese kids from the rich Chinese parents sending their kids there to play tennis and golf.
So that was to do with the Gatorade Sports Science was working with this.
So that's it. So this IMG Academy, this high school has a sports science lab funded by Gatorade Sports Science Institute there.
So that's where you were working.
So I was working at this high school within the laboratory. So it's like a leading sports science lab on the grounds of a high school. And this high school and the grounds and the facilities were so good, a lot of the US pro sports teams would send their athletes there to do their training or get testing. So we worked with NFL players, NBA players, MLB players, as well as some other US sports. And they would send their players to this high school. They had 16 soccer pitches at this high school. They had a full American football stadium at their high school. They had swimming pools and
here's you from western suburbs, part of close to Scumshine, if you know Sunshine. It doesn't have that.
it doesn't have that. No.
So it was pretty eye-opening for you.
Yeah, the amount of money in the US and in sports specifically, like one of these NFL or NBA teams has more money than all of the Australian sports put together in one team.
One team.
Yeah, like the Yankees is $1 billion enterprise. Like
yes, absolutely.
There's not even that much money in all of the AFL. I don't think.
There's MLB.
not
MLB shops all through Shanghai.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I worked there for 2 years, and then it's funny how all these things work out. But IMG is actually owned by Endeavor, who own the UFC now. So they kind of poached me off one of their other divisions there. But I actually met some of the guys at the UFC Performance Institute when I was presenting at a conference in the US. So I presented at a sports nutrition conference about my PhD about weight cutting.
Tell me about that. Now, that's very interesting. If people don't know Reid's background, apart from and thank you for sharing, your immense background and your academia. I didn't know it all. So it's awesome. But I think one thing, notoriety that you have beyond most people is that you helped, and explain a little bit about this. Correct me if I'm wrong. You helped write the protocol for weight cutting in a safe way for the Olympic Committee.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, we trawled
which is pretty amazing. I mean, if you allow me to say that, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's funny. So similar to what we talked about in dietetics, they have the best practice guidelines for things. Part of my PhD, me and my supervisors and the colleagues that I work with, we kind of wrote the best practice guidelines for weight cutting.
Did you help? Because I know there was a major change, and we talked
Mm.
about this in one of our courses one time. I think it was around 2015. Were you part of the major? Was your research part of the major change with MMA, changing the weight cutting rules, the timing of the weight cutting?
Yeah. You mean like with UFC when they changed the?
Well, because there was before, I think it was a 24-hour period or one
and
day,
like a 30-hour.
Yeah, and so it changed some of the hours to make it a little bit safer.
I wouldn't necessarily say that it was my research that did that, and whether it even had a hand in it. I think they just figured that give them more time to rehydrate, which is fair enough. But something that was quite nice to know was that even prior to me working with the UFC, they had cited a lot of my research with their protocols that they were already using with the UFC. So that was quite nice. And when I met the director, who's now my boss of the nutrition department at the UFC Performance Institute, Clint Wattenberg, in the US, when I presented at this conference. And then I got chatting to him. You know, that's how I formed that relationship. And obviously, he was already the head of the nutrition department at the UFC. But that's what kind of teed up my job in Shanghai, because when I had spoken to Clint, I actually spoke to him about another job in Las Vegas, but it was a little bit beneath the current level that I was at in terms of my career and also pay grade and whatnot. But then when they opened up the Performance Institute in Shanghai, they approached me. So I never applied for the job. They approached me and asked whether I'd be interested. And they said, we'll move you to Shanghai and you can lead the nutrition department in Shanghai. And would I be interested? And of course, you play coy and said, I may be interested. But of course, this was my dream job that my career was leading to. So I worked for Gatorade for 2 years, and they got offered this job in Shanghai. So they flew me from Florida to Shanghai to head the UFC Performance Institute Nutrition Department.
Interesting.
So yes, I was quite.
And how long have you been working for the UFC now for?
Just over 2 years.
Just over 2 years.
Yes, I moved to Shanghai 2019 in March. And
now, has time flown, or is it? How's that 2 years been with the UFC?
I mean, it's COVID, right? So it's very interesting.
And that's interesting as well, because I mean, we've known each other for a while, online and offline versions of each other. But you were with the UFC PI for 1 year.
Yeah.
If I'm wrong. And then COVID happened. And then you were stuck.
And then I was trapped outside of China. All of the foreign, and because for those outside of China, they might not realize the exact timing of it all, but it was during Chinese New Year that it all kind of exploded. And so
yes, I was in Australia at the time on a normal holiday that extended for 2 months.
And so I was on a what I thought would be a 1 week holiday in Chiang Mai in Thailand, which turned into 10 months. 10-month holiday. Yeah, but and so
in a luxury villa in Bali.
And then, it ended up in Bali. So it started off in Thailand.
Sure.
It went Shanghai, Chiang Mai, Bangkok, Auckland, New Zealand for a UFC event. Auckland, New Zealand to Las Vegas.
It was a 3-week. A 3-week holiday. We go back to China, back home to Castlemaine, Bendigo, in the country Victoria, where my family now lives. But yes, I was stuck out of Shanghai for about 2 months.
Yeah, and
not 10 months like you.
Yeah, and so my 1 week, which was in Chiang Mai, Thailand, turned into 10 months. But it went Chiang Mai to Bangkok, and then from Bangkok they flew me to Auckland to service a UFC event. So the Dan Hooker versus Paul Felder event in New Zealand, Auckland.
It was UFC Fight Night.
UFC was a fight night?
I can't remember if it was
maybe it was the main event.
Oh, it was a main event, okay.
Maybe. And then we went from there to Las Vegas to headquarters and worked the Zhang Wei Li versus Joanna fight.
Okay.
Which I believe was the last
UFC
fight.
Before they
yes.
Oh, that was scary.
Yeah.
Man.
And that was just before they shut it all down.
Wow.
And then I went back to Florida to see my.
That was an epic fight.
That was one of the best fights of all time, maybe the best fight of all time.
Of all time,
yeah.
Male or female?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
She's unreal.
She's something else.
She's blossomed. I've known her because our mutual friend Ruben Payan has been training her well before the UFC for free. He's a very unique, very good individual up in Beijing at his Human in Motion training center. And she's not just blossomed as a fighter, but as a human being. Her confidence. I mean, when I first met her, she's got a little bit of English now, as you know, but she's just blossomed in so many levels.
Mm,
She's made, I'm sure, the value of UFC, like Conor McGregor to the UFC globally.
Yeah.
I think for China, she's probably added $1 billion in value.
Yeah, I mean,
I may be
I don't know the
exaggerating
numbers,
that.
but for sure she's
Massive.
helped
She's the
her reach
Yao
in
Ming.
China. Yeah.
When I first met some of the UFC guys, I've told you the story. The UFC has been trying to get into China, trying to get, it's everyone, everyone's trying to get into China and get that hands on the Chinese gold, or the Chinese tea. Every company in the world wants that. And the NBA got that, and certain individuals, have patted themselves on the back of making the NBA the biggest thing in, since sliced bread in China. But actually it was Yao Ming.
Basically, yeah.
Yao Ming became famous, NBA became famous because he was the poster child, and he was a great player, and he's a great human being, Yao Ming. So they're all trying to find the next, Yao Ming for the UFC, and they were doing this. And they had their massive office in China years and years ago, trying to find talent. This because I've been here for 16 years. I think this is about 10, 12 years ago. They spent a lot of money and it was failure. Because there's a lot of fake fighters back then. You understand how MMA has evolved greatly in China. You've probably heard these stories. And they're still fake fighters. So the best and most famous fighters in China weren't real fighters.
Interesting.
They were gifted, and many of them they were performance enhanced athletes. They looked great, back like the Pride days, and they looked fantastic, geared up to the gills. But they weren't necessarily great fighters. When they had the very first Ultimate Fighter China version, which we sponsored, actually, by the way, you can see our protein in my old business. You can see our protein bars in the background. They wanted a lot of money for that sponsorship. I said, "You're joking. I'm giving you, man. I'm not that rich." We ended up giving them protein bars, and we got our protein bars in the Ultimate Fighter.
Nice.
It was a very boring Ultimate Fighter, though, as you may have heard.
Yes, of course.
They just sat around eating. There was no drunkards.
The Chinese fighters don't trash talk in the same way that the Westerners do.
Not like the very first season of Ultimate Fighter, and I'm sure you've seen many times. I mean, the trash talk, the drunken brawls inside the house. And
I mean, that's what they were hoping for.
Finally, China found, Zhang Weili, and she's just blossomed in so many ways. And she's really, you'd see it firsthand. And from what you've told me on the changes, especially we're not post-COVID, but we're, at least in China, it's a little bit more normal, and you're growing and you're getting these big media deals, and there's a lot of things changing. And again, I know you're not UFC management and you're not involved in things, but you do see a lot of momentum building with the UFC brand in China and in Asia. A lot of media deals, TV deals, pay-per-click, pay-per-view deals happening. Without Zhang Weili, would it be happening to that same level? And of course, I know you can't know for sure. But what's your gut feeling? You're on the ground.
Well, again, we can never know for sure, but you'd have to be an idiot to say that it would have the same success without her, right?
Absolutely.
Would NBA be the same without Yao Ming?
Yeah, exactly. Or like Conor McGregor, at the height of his fame, and the UFC deal was going through, the big sale I'm talking about, but for 4.4 billion,
something like that.
Just insane amounts.
Yeah.
Without Conor McGregor, and of course he, unlike Zhang Weili, he was very vocal on his value and the fact that he deserved 20% of the company or something ridiculous. But he was very well paid for those antics that he pulled. It's interesting. It's interesting to see, because I've seen the growth of the UFC brand to where it is now, that it is a household name in Asia. And without Zhang Weili and of course Leach, but Leach is not the same. He doesn't have a championship. He's an amazing fighter, an amazing human being. Great character, Jingliang. So everyone knows him as Leach, but he's just a fantastic. Also trained by Ruben Payan as well, for many years, well before he was famous. But without these people paving the road, would the UFC be where it is today?
Yeah, well, that's I mean, and we can't take credit for those guys. They've done the hard yards themselves, but that's the whole goal or the whole purpose behind the Performance Institute in Shanghai is to develop more local talent and get more Chinese MMA fighters in the UFC and with belts around their waist. So that
and you've got, on that note, you've got you were just explaining earlier, a whole bunch of new recruits that came in, and a bunch fighting at this upcoming card. When's this upcoming card? Zhang Wei Li?
So next weekend. So what is it?
It's next weekend.
The 24th. The 24th of April in the US. It'll be the 25th of April. I think that's the date. It's either the 24th or the 25th. So next Saturday. So
it's the Zhang Wei Li fighting.
She's fighting Rose.
That's
Yunus,
right.
Yeah, but that's not even the main event. So the main event is going to be the rematch of Jorge Masvidal versus Kamaru Usman.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
That's a huge card. And in that, are they in the undercard or part of the main event?
Our guys are the undercard.
They're in the undercard.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
interesting.
we got 3 from our academy. It'll be their first UFC fight. So yeah.
Because for many years I've been watching the UFC I didn't start. I can't say I'm one of the Pride guys. I'm not. But I have been watching the UFC a lot, and I've started social media groups about it. I've been a big fan. For years, Asian fighters, you'd see Japanese Korean, occasionally a Filipino, but you'd be almost never seeing Chinese fighters.
Yeah, I think it's dominated by the Chinese now in the UFC. I believe that out of the Asian countries that China has the most, Japan maybe only have 1, maybe 2 fighters now.
But they were leading.
Changed, for sure.
And correct me if I'm wrong, it's not just changed, but it's going to go on fire soon.
Oh, for sure.
With the amount of amazing, what you've told me, there is some talent coming out of China that is just unprecedented talent from minority races.
Yeah. So most of our fighters are from Xinjiang region, Inner Mongolia region, and from Chengdu, but they're actually Tibetan. A lot of these kids, and they're all from one gym in Chengdu, and they're all Tibetan. These guys, and it's exciting times, and our job is getting more exciting day by day because we're 2 years in now training these guys, and the proof's in the pudding. We've had like 5 guys signed to the UFC from our academy, and it's just going to be more and more.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
proof's in the pudding, and that's interesting because it was a bit of I'm sure you've heard this story of how the UFC, if people don't know, the UFC Performance Institute has only been in about 2.5 years or 2 years.
Yep.
Since you were there in the beginning, but people don't know the backstory, which is very, very interesting. I went to that event. It was the UFC Shanghai event, and it was sold out. It's sold out.
Bisping and Gastelum, right?
Yes.
I think was
yes. Bisping and Gastelum probably he shouldn't be in that weight class, but he just can't cut weight. He probably should talk to you. He decimated Bisping. It KO'd him, and he's just this freak boxer. Gastelum. Anyway, it wasn't Bisping. It was Silva, wasn't it?
Maybe it was supposed to be Silva, and then it was.
There was a change. Yeah, there was a change.
To be honest, I didn't watch the event. So
I was there. Yeah. I was there physically, and it was sold out like within minutes of the tickets going on sale. Opposite to when they tried to do it in Macau, China event. Macau is not. Macau is part of China. I need to get this politically correct, but it's not part of the mainland. So you're not going to get the same coverage of event and people going there. But they did one in Beijing. Beijing's different, but Shanghai was sold out immediately. They made a killing, and with that, they go, well, we should do something in China, and we should. And with the profit, which is a huge amount of profit, they spent tens of millions of dollars and created the PI. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, correct.
Okay, that's the story. It's pretty amazing. It's so much bigger and more advanced than the one in Vegas.
I wouldn't say more advanced, but certainly bigger. Ours is, I believe, 3 times the size.
3 times the size.
But we largely replicate what they do in terms of technologies and assessments and whatnot. But the biggest difference is that we have the academy. So in Vegas, they service existing rostered UFC fighters.
Okay.
Anybody can go and use the facility. The same with us. But in addition to servicing already contracted rostered fighters, we have this academy, which is a talent development pathway program.
Sure.
Yeah, to get some of the existing MMA talent in China and upskill them, because I mean there's some real talent in China, but like definitely the performance side in terms of their strength and conditioning programs and nutrition, sports science, rehab, recovery.
Wow.
All this is a lot behind maybe the rest of the world and certainly the Western countries. And then also we have a coaching department which help fine tune their skills. So the combination of the foreign expert coaches and the world class, world leading performance departments is just kind of helping hone that existing talent that's already here. Yeah.
Interesting. Wow, I've been there. I mean, you gave me the Cook's tour.
Yes.
2-ish years ago, or 1 year and a half, and it's amazing. I mean, you've got a state of the art cryotherapy in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of things.
DEXA. Yeah. I mean, it's out of this world. If anyone, although you need to get a VIP pass from this guy, but it's well worth it, and it's just amazing that that the PI, it's the largest in the world as far as MMA training, except for maybe Muscle Farms Training Institute.
Yeah, I've never
before they went bankrupt.
I don't know how it compares, but
they don't exist anymore. They went bankrupt multiple times. The brand Muscle Farm, but they had their performance institute going with a lot of MMA fighters. With what's his name? Rampage Jackson. Rampage.
Was he there? I'm unaware.
Yeah, because he was a Muscle Farm athlete, and he was always at the PI, the Muscle Farm Performance Institute training. Anyway, we're going off a tangent. We change it up a gears. I think a couple of things I'd love to hear from you. I think the audience, any without mentioning names or putting yourself in liability, any funny stories on weight cutting, or because I mean you specialize, you help some of the elite, and we're talking the current champions or whatever. I mean, you've helped many people cut weight. And it doesn't have to be weight cutting. It doesn't have to be UFC. Any funny stories or any stories that you have to tell?
I mean, it depends on your definition of funny, but there's sad stories and there's funny stories and there's interesting stories and all this stuff. But it's always interesting just how wrong people get it.
Sure.
And some of the methods that you hear, and this is part of why we're in China, is to help some of these athletes refine their practices, and like it's just people would be astounded about some of the lengths that people go to cut weight.
Okay.
And so like for example, one of our fighters, I remember this guy telling me, I asked him, how do you normally cut weight? And this guy's method was and it was like 3, I remember it in 3s, because he said, all I do for 3 weeks before my weigh-in is eat nothing but boiled meat. He's from Inner Mongolia, and he just eats boiled meat and nothing else for 3 weeks. And then 3 days before the competition, before the weigh-in, he doesn't eat, or tries not to eat, and tries not to drink. So it's like 3 weeks of only boiled meat, and then 3 days of trying not to eat and trying not to drink. And then on the last day, he does 3 sauna sessions, and the last one being as long as it takes. So, and then to make his weight loss. So he does the first one for however long, it was an hour or something, and then the second one again, and then the last one he just stays in and keeps weighing himself until he makes weight. And so it was 3 weeks boiled meat, 3 days no food or drink, and then 3 sauna sessions. And so obviously there's better ways to do it.
Yeah, I mean, he'd have no glycogen storage. He'd have very little in the gas tank when he actually fights.
Well, I mean, that's why we have the recovery period after weigh-in. So the idea is to deplete the glycogen tank, but then you're going to refuel it.
Gotcha.
And then in terms of just people not understanding it. So there's examples of world-class athletes, trying to sweat the weight off, which is obviously what they're trying to do, but drinking water while they're on the treadmill because they're working so hard, because they think, all right, I'm working, I'm sweating. A little bit of water's not going to hurt, but it kind of defeats the purpose of what you're trying to accomplish. You're trying to
dump
get the water out.
Not just lose fat, right? Because losing fat, you've already done at that point in time.
Correct.
You're just trying to lose water.
Yeah.
Or stomach content, bowel content, as you've.
I mean, you're trying to deplete your glycogen. You're trying to empty your stomach, and the last bit is getting whatever water out is necessary.
I've heard from pro fighters. We've sponsored over the years in my old business, which was supplements. I mean, in my old business, and we sponsored pro fighters, amateur fighters. We worked with ex-UFC athletes. One of them actually was on the second season of The Ultimate Fighter, Andy, a Taiwanese gentleman. You may have met Andy. He's still here. And he always said to me, and I've heard this many times, fighting is the easiest part. It's easier than weight cutting. If you're a true professional athlete, you know that just cutting weight is more of a battle than stepping in the ring.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people say that. Also, it's equal to that. There's two fights. There's the making weight, and then the fight itself. Hopefully, what I do and what my team does is help athletes
makes it easier,
make this whole process easier.
Sure.
And it's not just, it's not this crazy battle. It's just part of the process. It's like, yes, it's not going to be fun, but training's not fun either.
Follow this protocol, stick to it 99%, and you'll make it without nearly killing yourself.
Correct.
Which unfortunately does happen to some to some athletes,
for sure,
especially in MMA.
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow. Any other interesting stories?
I mean, in terms of interesting stories, so during the whole pandemic, I was actually ended up in Abu Dhabi for the Fight Island events. So I was in Fight Island for 5 weeks.
We were communicating back and forth. It sounded like an interesting experience just getting there.
We were indeed, yes. Yeah,
nearly stuck in Bali for forever.
Yeah, so after 6 months stint in Bali, and then finally to Abu Dhabi before returning to China. But I was in Abu Dhabi for 5 weeks and worked like 35 days straight, and racked up maybe 15 or 18 COVID tests during the time.
Wow.
So I'm up to about 25 now. I had another
25.
Yeah, I had, because and then coming back to China, and then we travel around China for events. And
wow. Do you know how many tests I've had?
How many?
Zero.
Okay.
Have you been vaccinated yet?
Yeah, I haven't been vaccinated off.
No,
I get a test every second day, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, so but my point was that I was in Abu Dhabi, so that was a very interesting experience in and of itself. Working, I did like 150 weight cuts during that time.
150,
close to at least over 100, because we did 5 weeks, 5 events, and there was 22 to 30 athletes on each card, and
you were the main guy for this. Did you have a team around you?
So the first 2 weeks was me and my colleague Charles, Charles Stull in the US, the Vegas PI, and then I did the last 3 events by myself. But we were tasked with servicing the nutrition needs of these athletes during that time, because they're flying from all around the world, end up in Abu Dhabi on Fight Island in this quarantine bubble, so they can't go to the shop and get their own food. They can't bring their own nutritionist to cook the food for them.
Yeah.
So we were coordinating with the hotel kitchen staff to cook all the food for the athletes. We helped. So
your role was even more intensive. Not only 35 days straight, not only all the COVID tests, but your role was more important to other events that you help athletes on.
For sure, because they didn't. So normally at the UFC events, the PI staff go there to help assist, but the athletes can choose to engage or not engage.
Okay.
But with the Fight Island events, we had to do it all, because they were on Fight Island and there was no access to anything. The only food they got was the food from the hotel. And the fighters specifically got the food that we got the food in accordance with the diets that we designed for them based on their needs. So we did that. And the interesting part, I mean, there was many stories and interesting parts, but I was fortunate enough to be in the arena at the Khabib Nurmagomedov Justin Gaethje fight. So Khabib's last fight, I was there when he retired. I was 10 meters from the cage.
10 meters, wow.
And got to see Khabib in.
He is just an amazing athlete.
And then we went back to the hotel and we were part of the welcoming party when Khabib come back to the hotel, and he gave a speech to everybody at the hotel.
Wow.
And it was kind of like, his last kind of speech with him with the belt and everything. And before he went back up.
And no selfie with Khabib?
I didn't get a selfie with him. I've got on my Instagram. I recorded the little speech that he gave us all and that. But I mean, that's sporting history, and
very much so.
And even if he had a comeback fight,
has he been voted in pound for pound greatest fighter of all time?
I mean, I'm not sure officially or whatnot, but surely he's got to be right. It's between him and GSP and Khabib. Khabib's undefeated. So
they're both true. What I greatly respect about both those athletes is, in my opinion, they truly represent martial arts in the terms of being a gentleman, in terms of balancing your emotions,
Yeah.
being
Hard work, discipline,
hard
reliable,
work, discipline,
just consistent.
Yeah. Unlike some others, we won't mention names. Conor McGregor.
I didn't say that.
Yeah. He didn't say it.
Yeah.
Conor McGregor. Unlike some other athletes or John Bon Jones, who don't necessarily great fighters, amazing for selling tickets, but they don't represent what I view as the Bruce Lee code of ethics, code of morale, and in true Brazilian jiu-jitsu level of martial arts. These two do equal to each other.
I think that's why everybody appreciates them, and you're hard pressed to find people that don't like these two guys. You
couldn't find it. You can certainly, there's two camps for Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
The haters and the lovers.
Yeah.
Recently more haters, but two camps. There's be only one camp for Khabib and GSP.
By and large, I would agree. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so that was a great experience to be there, to be part of that.
It's a history, man. You'll never. I mean, you could be telling your grandkids one day about that experience. He's an amazing fighter. I'd hope he comes back. I mean, never say never. Although he's pretty heartbroken after his father passing, and his father not allowed to be watching the fights as well, which is pretty heartbreaking, as well, for ridiculous reasons. But that's certainly one to remember forever, mate.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was a good experience, and I'm lucky. I've been very fortunate with some of the experiences that I've had and opportunities that I've been gifted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, switching it up a little bit, because some of the, not everyone has the opportunity to speak to you, and unless you're teaching them, and you're doing the students are doing one of our GPNI/ISSN certifications. What quick? I mean, because we probably need to wrap it up. We're going for a little bit of time, but on before we end, I think it'd be great, if you give the people listening, what are the 3 top tips for losing weight? Losing, not necessarily cutting weight. I say probably losing fat. What are the top 3 tips you could give the audience?
Yeah, I mean, and so we kind of roll this into, we had a bit of a discussion about this, about kind of myths and where people go wrong and stuff like this. So if you're talking like top 3 tips and also things that people get wrong or don't understand properly, number 1, and this is more the actual kind of nerdy science side of it, but like when people question the relevance of calories, I think this is one of the biggest misconceptions, when people think that there's significantly more to it than calories. Because at the end of the day, if you need to lose body fat, you need to be in a calorie deficit. And this is like,
so just the keto diet alone won't work?
Not independent of a calorie deficit. So
or intermittent fasting alone won't work?
Not independent of a calorie
or
deficit.
Or low carb alone won't work? Or high protein diet? Or the vegan diet. Come on, mate. The vegan diet
vegan's
works.
The exception. You can eat whatever you want if you're vegan. And
great.
No,
thank you, mate.
So that was a joke.
So no American barbecue tonight for us.
Potentially we can. We can. Yeah. But yes.
With fake plant-based meat.
So that's a big one. People think there's more to it than that, when by and large, like, calorie deficit is what drives fat loss.
I think that's very interesting. I mean, I've been in this game for a long time, but to be frank, I've gone down those rabbit holes in regards to there must be a magic diet out there that works. But what you're telling me, and I think what the audience needs to say, is there are variations on the diet, but it's calories in, calories out.
Correct, 100% correct. Now, that's not to say there's not better or worse, quote unquote, diets, because different things will work for different people, because they help you regulate your appetite differently. They fit into your lifestyle differently. Some people prefer to eat higher fat or higher carb or higher protein, and that's completely fine. And there's different strategies that are more and less effective. Certainly eating lower energy density foods, more fruits and vegetables, less high fat foods generally will make it easier for people to achieve that calorie deficit. But it's the calorie deficit that drives the weight loss.
Interesting. So there you go, everyone. There's no magic formula.
So that's a big one. Number 2, and these are kind of boring points, but number 2 is just that it takes time.
Sure.
So like, a lot of people will say, oh, I've tried everything and I can't lose weight. And I'll say to them, have you tried diet and exercise? And they say, yeah. And I say, for several months. And then that's where they're less confident in their answer. Everybody does it for a day or 2 and doesn't see immediate weight loss. But you need to be in a calorie deficit. You need to be in it long enough to actually reduce the fat. So it takes time.
And everyone's different, right?
Everyone's different, yeah.
Every UFC fighter that you train is different. Every human being is different.
people people
There
are
are some
different,
general rules,
but we're more similar than we are different. So the rules
Okay.
apply to everyone, but I think what you're alluding to is like maybe the rate of weight loss. Some people will
Yes.
lose weight very quickly, and they don't need adjustments to the diet. Some people, you put them on a 2,500 calorie diet, they lose a kilo a week for the next 8 weeks. Perfect. Other people, they lose that weight for 2 weeks and then it slows, and you need to adjust.
Yeah.
And things like this. So everybody's a little bit different. People are more resistant to weight loss
I'm
or
an
weight
easy
gain.
I'm an easy gainer on all levels.
Yes, so am I. I can
muscle and
put
fat.
on 100%. Some athletes they lose body fat very quickly, and others are just very resistant to it. But it doesn't mean the rules don't apply. It just means that it takes longer, or there's a longer deficit
and
required.
you need longer deficit, or you need to go to deeper levels. I was always, when I've been in this game for a long time, and when in my bodybuilding era and manipulating sports nutrition and always trying to find that magic fat loss diet, or fat loss pill, I was always disheartened. I was always disheartened watching my mates, and I was weighing my food, watching my calories. No carbohydrates came from vegetables. I mean, I was so disciplined, eating 6 meals a day and all of this stuff. And I was making results. I was cutting weight. But compared to some other mates that go on a diet for 2 weeks and they're already walking around beach bodies, that always pissed me off.
Genetic differences are real, unfortunately.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's why some people can win gold medals and some people can't. I mean, it's obviously a lot of hard work, but genetic differences are real. And some people always have an easier time of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So not all of us can be, elite athletes. Some of us can train elite athletes.
Correct. Yeah. And so we're just talking about top tips. So one I said was understand calories.
Sure.
Matter. Number 2, give it sufficient time. And I mean, and there's a lot of tips. But number 3, and this is funny because this maybe goes against some of what we just said, but there's no one size fits all approach.
Yes.
So it's like we kind of said, you can do keto, you can do vegan, you can do high protein, you can do whatever. And there's going to be different things that work for different people. So don't and also it's okay to be flexible. So like a lot of people think it's chicken and broccoli all day, and this is the only thing that works.
Sure.
But you can eat, delicious foods and all sorts of different kinds of diets, as long as the nutrition adds up. So as long as the calories are appropriate, as long as you're getting sufficient protein, there's many different approaches that are going to work.
And on the protein, and there's different schools of thought. I mean, you're in the trenches. I mean, rather than what the healthy diet pyramid or whatever a government would say is healthy, and then you've got the more extreme research on protein. So you're looking at what government would say 0.5, 0.6. What's the general?
We're talking grams per kilogram.
Yeah, grams per kilo. What's the general?
I don't think anyone says that, but 0.8 is the lower end.
Lower end.
Yeah,
okay.
So they'll say 0.8 just to maintain like net protein balance.
Okay, so on a healthy diet pyramid and by the mass market, there's just 0.8. Then you've got extreme to say it's safe to have up to 3 grams of protein, which sounds even extreme to me. But some of the research out there has said that it's still safe. It's extreme, but it's still safe. What is your take? And you're in the trenches on elite athletes. What do you think? Not necessarily elite athletes, but the average person going to the gym. What is a good amount of protein per kilo of body weight?
I can give a very short, simple answer, and then we can go into detail if you want, but 1.5 to 2. Leave it at that.
1.5 to 2. Sounds good. Yeah, I find, if you're looking at your calories and you're looking at your macronutrients, I find it's hard to get up to really high levels of protein unless you're basically on a protein-only diet. Because if you're trying to get a good amount of fiber, a good amount of vegetables in your diet, I mean, by weight, they don't have as much calories, but if you're having some rice or you're having some complex carbohydrates in there, I think it's hard to get over, if you're looking at calorie deficit and trying to cut weight.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and again, it depends what you're eating and how big you are and everything, but so that's why that range 1.5 to 2.
1.5 to 2.
Like if you're certainly...
and females on the 1.5?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, like more towards the lower end, and it depends. Like, and again, it's like we're talking like you said, not just elite athletes, but I'm assuming like exercising people and those who want reasonable amount of muscle mass.
Yes,
but certainly you could go lower than that, like even 1.2. You could say 1.2 to 2. and that way anywhere in that range. It's not saying more is better, but having more does not necessarily hurt. So if somebody comes to me and they say, I'm feeling completely fine, like I'm in good shape, my life's good, I'm eating 2 grams of protein, I would say that's completely fine. The same person, I feel great, my muscle mass is great, my body fat is great, I'm eating 1.2, I would say that's fine.
So it's a trial and error situation. Everyone's different. You need to find out what works for you. And I think from seeing, doing it myself and seeing many people, consistency is the most important element versus bouncing from one diet to the other.
Well, I'll give you an example with the protein. So with our athletes, we use that range, just like rough range 1.5 to 2.
Okay.
This is the ballpark range for all of our athletes at the academy.
Sure.
We do a fight camp with them. We put them on 1.5 to 2. We sit down, work out a diet for them. We ask them what they want to eat. We look at the foods available, and they're not going to eat the exact same every day. But as long as they're roughly in that range, okay, then I'm happy. And then we look at their fight camp. They do a diet for 6 weeks leading up to their fight. We measure their muscle mass pre and post. Their muscle mass doesn't change. They were happy. Their fight camp went well. Then I'm like, sweet. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That plan worked for this person. If, however, the exact same scenario happened and they got that 1.5 to 2, let's say they got 1.5, and then after the 6 weeks, we noticed they lost a lot of muscle this fight camp.
Sure.
Next time around, we'll say, okay, next time we're going to go higher protein for this person, because we think, like, why did they lose muscle mass? Maybe their training wasn't sufficient. Well, we know they were training hard and they were following the appropriate schedule that the S&C coach put together. So maybe they dropped the weight too fast, or the protein wasn't high enough.
Okay.
And so that's how we kind of do that. But again, like looking at that range, 1.5 to 2, and then adjust next time based on the data.
Do you ever go over 2?
I don't care if they go over 2.
As long as they're making weight.
As long as everything's fine. Like with our athletes, we don't, if they're managing their weight appropriately themselves and everything's fine and they're training hard and they're feeling good and there's no reason for us to intervene, but this guy's eating 2.5 grams of protein, potentially like some of the Mongolian fighters do, because they eat a lot of meat, these guys.
A lot of lamb, right?
Yeah, a lot of lamb, a lot of beef. We just leave them to it. Like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if this person is struggling to lose weight and we need to get their calories down, and I want to make sure they're getting some carbohydrates to help with their training, that's when I'll think about, all right, if this guy's eating 3 grams of protein per kilogram and he's not eating much carbs, maybe we can knock off some of that protein to give him some more carbs to help with his training quality. Sure,
that makes sense. Interesting, mate. Okay, to switch gears a little bit, because we can certainly gas bag. Must be the caffeine in the black tea we're having. So we have a new course. Well, it's not. It's the same course that we did last year, and you've taught the ISSN Sports Nutrition Specialist course, SNS.
Yes.
You've taught this last year, November.
Correct.
It was a great course, but we've made some changes in it, and we're bringing out a new version the end of May. It's been worked on for the last 6 months. It's the 3.0 version, post-COVID or during. It's on demand. There's a lot of new stuff. Some of the elements that you've added and edited and improved. If you could tell the audience.
Yeah. So like you said, I taught the course at the end of last year, and it was a great course. You had a lot of that content largely already developed when I taught the course, and of course before teaching it, I wanted to put my personal touch and spin on it. So I reviewed the existing content and edited it prior to the course that I delivered. And I was very happy with it at that stage. And then also my edits, of course, I was even more happy after I edited it a little bit. But that existing course was already very good. And we delivered that course and all the students loved it, and it was great. And since then, you and I and some of your other team have been working on updating it. And basically it's kind of more of the same, but updated and made sure to reflect the current state of the literature. So again, like we talked about earlier, not a lot changes in the sports nutrition world in terms of the fundamentals, but in terms of the cutting edge, tip of the iceberg, icing on the cake type stuff. We just wanted to make sure that that it was up to date and that it was current. So a lot of what we did was look at the existing content that we had and made sure it was fresh and made to reflect the current state of the literature. And then also looking at not just the kind of research and the underlying physiology, but some of the feedback on the way it was taught, and kind of the coaching strategies and some of the anecdotes and examples and things that we gave to illustrate how you apply the research. We just made sure to update that and have that reflect some of the feedback that we got from myself from teaching the course and from some of the students who did the course.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been spending about, honestly, 6 months longer. You could say years, because we've been teaching this course for many, many years. It's gone through many refinements. Every single course we're refining, we're improving with the experts, yourself, Dr. Roger, many, many of the other ISSN experts, and non-ISSN experts that we work with. But this actual update is extreme. It's completely modularized to suit an online learning format. Yes, it can be taught offline. Yes, in other formats, but it's very modularized, step-by-step process to make it easier to digest the information. We've put a lot more case studies in the content, as you know, and there's also other research and papers in there, not just the ISSN as well, but the British Journal, and some of the other ones we talked about before, the European...
the European Journal of Sports Science.
Yes,
and
correct.
I think you're also alluding to some of the IJS NEM, so the International Journal of Sports Nutrition, Exercise, Metabolism, and the International Journal of Sports Physiology and Performance. And,
Absolutely.
And so just kind of broadening away from the ISSN position stands, which are obviously quite good, but
they're fantastic.
To take a much more kind of global view of the nutrition research.
Just to round out, I mean, the ISSN is great, the position stands are amazing, and the course is still about that, but we're just filling in some gaps on things that the course, especially in some of the international markets, was looking for. So it's just a lot more honed in, this new version. It has a lot more case studies in relation to different athletes and different exercises. There's templates of diets, so people can literally download some of the diets if they're looking for someone, they've got a client or themselves, if it's a female looking to lose weight. These are all templated, so it's a lot easier for people to digest the information and immediately use that information in creating a diet for their clients and things like that. Another key element on the changes, as you know, is breaking the supplements. The course is not, even a lot of people get confused on sports nutrition. They go, you guys teaching creatine and protein powder. No, it is a part of what we teach, but it's honestly less than 10% of the entire course. And the 10% that is in the course, we like to break down is what is proven by science on supplements that work, what is moderately proven, and is what is, well, hogwash or not proven. And we really break this into great detail into 3 categories, so people ethically can know what supplements have efficacy, what actually work, and safe, and they can recommend their clients. Like creatine has 30 years of research, protein has research, beta alanine has a ton of research. It doesn't just give you prickly skin; it actually works. Whereas L-carnitine and some of these other BCAA, they don't have much research. They may not actually do a lot at all.
Yeah, and this was some of the I wouldn't say changes, because again the existing material is quite good, but some of the evolution of the course that I was kind of most happy to be involved with, because I'm quite passionate about kind of separating the fact from fiction and the marketing hype from from what I would actually use with my athletes. And so I do think like the updates to the supplements content in the course is well warranted and in line with where I feel the research provides a good evidence base to recommend.
Absolutely. So for those that are interested more, we do have the upcoming and it'll be ongoing sports nutrition specialist certification. You can look in the comments below and ask questions, or look at the website, thegpni.com, or send us an email to info@thethegpni.com, or again, just look at the comments below. And we do it's an on-demand format, so people can watch it anywhere in the world at any time. There's no constraints on time zones or borders anymore. It makes it a lot easier for people, and also in multiple languages. So English format obviously is available, but also Chinese language, Also, very shortly, Japanese language and Korean language, and we're also looking at other languages out there too. The premise of GPNI, the Global Performance Nutrition Institute, and working with great organizations like the International Society of Sports Nutrition is we are borderless. Thanks to the internet, that people can access experts like yourself and like the many other experts that we work with, and the research without borders of language or actual borders of countries. So by creating that bridge, people can gain access to the most credible research, again, like the ISSN research, and experts like yourself, no matter of language, no matter of border. And that's kind of what we're offering now with the GPNI. And shortly, again, hopefully by November, maybe October, it'll be in Japanese language as well.
Perfect. Sounds good, and definitely glad to be part of it. And after meeting you a while ago, and slowly doing more and more with the ISSN and GPNI, it's very excited to see where it's all heading.
Yeah, it's been a lot of yards, and many more ahead of us. Just on Japan, we have the conference in Japan coming up in November. It's going to be an online offline version, and hopefully, because it's not too far for us to travel. I'm hoping, and I'm penciling both of us in. I need to discuss those details with you on that, but I'm hoping that we can travel to Japan. It would be wonderful to go there.
I'm hoping we can, but I don't think we will.
November.
Let's see.
Fingers crossed. We'll see Dr. Seiji in Japan hopefully soon. So I think we've let me double check. We did write some brief notes on covering things, but I think we've we've been chewing the ears off each other for a long time. Any final words from you, words of wisdom, your experience? Actually, one thing I'd like, and we don't go too much of a tangent, but one thing we like to do beyond just teaching performance nutrition at GPNI is we want the people, rather than just having a piece of paper at the end of they learn a lot of nutrition. That's fantastic. But we'd like that piece of paper to mean something tangible, meaning they can boost their career, they can boost their income. And that's very, very important, especially in today's ever-changing world where people in the fitness industry have been impacted largely. So, what are some tips that you can think of? Because you've had granted a very difficult start of your career, and you were crawling along, tooth and nail to get where you are today. And my hat's off to you in a lot of respect. But on seeing a trainer, what tips can you say on boosting your career in performance nutrition, or tips on being a better coach?
Yeah.
Because you were a trainer as well, which, well beforehand.
Yeah. I mean, so a few different things, and again, trying not to chop too much time, but there's like the business side and improving your kind of financial outlook, and then also being a better coach and a better trainer and a nutrition coach. But kind of overall, I think number one, it's like education. Learn as much as you can. Whether that's like formal university degrees.
The more you learn, the more you earn. Have you heard that before?
I have heard that. On average, I would say yes. On average, there's a strong correlation. It doesn't always equal that, but on average, it's certainly not a bad horse to put your bets on. If it's like doing more courses and getting more education, definitely helps, and also helps separate you from others. Number one, it's like the pieces of paper are nice. They make you look better and help you get your head above the crowd. But also makes you more confident and makes you know what you're talking about. So that's very important. But another thing is like look for opportunities. Unfortunately there's going to be a lot of working for free and a lot of making connections and volunteering yourself to work for free at key times. Not always. We don't want to work for free forever. And certainly in the beginning of your career, there's going to be a lot more working for free than there is at the towards the latter half of your career.
Because if you didn't pave your road along those paths, you would never had those opportunities of working for the UFC.
Correct, exactly right. Yeah. And then
like slave labor, almost working for the Australian Institute of Sport.
For 3 to 4 years.
3 to 4 years.
It was like 7 days a week.
Yeah. Delayed gratitude. Delayed gratitude. I think a lot of people.
Gratification.
delayed gratification.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people, and I certainly have done that, being an entrepreneur. I mean, that's another story. That's an entire other podcast. But I think a lot of people just don't understand. They always look at the tip of the iceberg. They don't look what's underneath that iceberg. You know, people, whether it's a Hollywood superstar or a business, there are some, you know, freak examples where people just got lucky overnight and they're in success. You know, and you and I are both still working towards things. You know, some people look at us going, "Oh wow, oh wow," you know, they haven't firstly seen what's gratification.
Yeah.
You need to work, be humble to get to that level.
Mate, it's like, I don't know, I feel like the golden number's like 10 years. Like it's kind of sad.
And how long have you been in the trenches?
But it's like, yeah, about like, you know, I mean, since I started university, it's 15 or so. But you know, it's like if you want to be very successful, you got to work hard at things, and it certainly doesn't happen overnight.
No matter which career, whether
Correct.
it's performance nutrition, personal training, or growing a business.
The other one that I'll say, the last one, and we could talk forever, but the last point that's very important.
Sure.
So I said, like, you know, improve your education and your understanding and this sort of thing. Work hard and be prepared to kind of work for free and you know, take jobs that you think are maybe beneath you in the beginning. But then the last one is just like the networking side of it.
Sure.
And I really hated it when I was younger, like the networking, and it felt kind of sleazy to me, like you're, you know, selling your soul a bit. But it's not about that, but it's about like looking for opportunities and thinking a few steps ahead, you know, like it's not being friends with people for the sake of how it can benefit you, but it's like understanding that there's certain places that you want to be and opportunities that will come from taking the first step in a certain direction, which isn't, you know, immediately like, all right, I'm going to do this to get this, but it's like, well, you know, here's a chance to do research at the AIS. Well, I don't really necessarily want to do research, but maybe this will help me get something else. Although having said that, I really love research now.
Sure.
But you know, like take opportunities and build networks. Very, very important.
Yeah. In all areas.
In everything.
But yeah, you need to be eating some humble pie and by creating those networks, it can't be always what's in it for me.
Yeah.
To at least begin those, it needs to be just an evolution, a natural evolution that eventually something will come back to you. But you need to accept a lot of opportunities. You need to be the Jim Carrey's Yes Man. If you've seen that movie, you know,
I have not.
But Yes Man, very, very, very awesome film where he gets hypnotized to agree on everything and he has to say yes to everything.
Okay. Sounds like a Jim Carrey movie.
Yeah, it's a really good film, but it has a you know, a message, you know, a plot, a message in there, and it's, you know, you need to take opportunities. Rather than saying no to everything, at least early in your career, you need to say yes. Or if you're trying to evolve your career in, you know, you're a trainer right now, you're just doing training, you want to transition or create another skill set, you know, don't start charging people $500 on creating a diet plan.
Yes.
You know, maybe even charge next to nothing or charge a nominal fee. Get results, of course, using credible research, you know, ISSN position stand research, or being certified and having that credibility. But don't expect to be a millionaire overnight just by having a certification, or if not having a certification, just being an Instagram celebrity giving diet advice. You know, you need to get people results.
Yeah, and something else that falls into the kind of experience and networking side of it is like looking for mentors. Like, and a big part of the looking for mentors is maybe, you know, doing some work for free or finding out how you can help somebody who represents the kind of position that maybe you want to have. So it's like, if you have good mentors, they're going to give you advice. They're going to show you how to do the thing that you want to be good at.
Yes.
But hopefully they can also help provide you with experience, because you need experience working with athletes.
Yes.
If you want to be a good coach.
Yes.
And athletes aren't going to let you work with them, or they're definitely not going to pay you to work with them.
Yes.
But however, the person who's already working with them, who may be getting paid, you can maybe help them out, and then you get experience working with the athletes. So you need experience. You know, you need good mentors to show you the ropes and shortcut your learning. And then, like we said, you know, it's like, be prepared to kind of work for free in the beginning. And like you said, say yes more than you say no in the beginning. But it's funny how these things flip on their head, right?
Sure.
In the beginning of your career, you work for free a lot. You say yes to everything, and then but then also like further along in your career, you need to understand your worth. And
Yes.
don't work for free, and you begin to say no to a lot of things
Sure.
because you're pressed for time. But it's
Sure.
funny how these things do
Well, it's a
invert,
balance.
and
Yeah.
understand that they will
Mm.
invert. You know,
Mm.
you think I want to get paid a lot. I want to like be able to pick what I do for my job, and it's like that'll come, but much further on and a lot later than you think that
Absolutely.
it will in the beginning, or that you think you deserve.
Yeah, I think there's one point, and we should try to wrap up, but I think it's interesting you pointed out the mentoring ship and the mentors. We actually have a new program. Actually, I haven't talked to you. That's when we have our vegan American barbecue later. It's another subject, but we have a new program coming out. It's our master instructor program, and we can discuss more about that over dinner. And it includes many things. One of them is master instructor, how to be a master instructor, how to teach. It also includes the CISSN certification, which you are a CISSN, I am CISSN, but in other parts of the world, there aren't too many CISSNs. It's a very, maybe not for you, but it was very difficult for me, the CISSN exam. So we have that included. In addition, we have a mentorship program included. So at the end of this master instructor program, they will be certified. And it's only limited numbers. Most people won't be able to get in. They have to have prerequisites. They have to be certified SNS prior. They have to have 5 to 10 years experience. They have to have a degree. They have to be related experience. There's a whole bunch of different prerequisites. But one of the key aspects we're adding in is actually mentorship with experienced people. If you have the time, you're going to be one of those mentors.
Let's see.
we will talk about that over dinner. But I think it's very, very important to find mentors in life. And I think that's something we are looking at providing more of in our education programs as well.
Yeah, it's certainly a key component. And again, we're pressed for time, but like part of the whole dietetics accreditation process is that first year after graduation. You've already done 5.5 years of study, but they make you have a mentor with 5 to 10 years experience that has to sign off on all your stuff. And they do that to ensure the quality of the graduates and the transition from a graduate into a accredited practicing dietitian. But and this is similar with a lot of like medical and similar industries. Like that whole mentorship is crucial.
Excellent, mate. And we should give a shout out to Dr. Reid Real. Again, he doesn't like to be calling him doctor, but your Instagram. How do people find you, Reid?
I'm terrible, but I'm trying to be better. So my Instagram is my name, Reid Real, ReidReale.
Okay.
Yeah, they can find me on Instagram. I think your team are putting together some WeChat articles and stuff.
Yes,
also.
Yes.
And I did have a Facebook page, which was Combat Sports Nutrition.
Okay.
And I haven't done much on it in a long, long time, but there's a lot of content on that. But I think my Instagram is linked to it, so the Instagram automatically feeds into the Facebook. But I'm pretty terrible at social media.
That's Reid, REID dot?
No, not dot. One word.
One word. Reid, REID, REALE.
Correct.
Reid Real. So that's how you'll find Reid. And also you'll find Reid on the GPNI. You'll see a lot of his content on our Instagram, which is the GPNI on Instagram and also Facebook. And also on the courses coming up very, very, very soon and ongoing. So I think we should wrap it up because it's about, as we say in Australia, it's about beer o'clock. Can we say that as performance nutritionists?
It's
vitamin B.
Protein shake o'clock?
Protein shake o'clock or vitamin B. But anyway, it's getting late. But Reid, thank you very much. I know you're extremely busy and I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming in. I really like this term, Tea with Drew.
Tea with Drew.
We might change it from the cheers. Was there any left there? There's a drop left. You've got a drop.
I was waiting for you.
I better fill it up. But rather than I do,
you should cheers and the video stops on the cheers.
We should. That's a very good idea. We'll do that. I liked the performance human potential project because I'd like this podcast and everything that we do to be not just about nutrition, but finding that true human potential on being the best we can. And not just be about nutrition, but nutrition is a huge part of being the best we can. And so that was the premise I was thinking. But I like the tea with Drew. Cheers. Thank you, everyone. Yeah. Done.